We'll be talking about schedules and routines, creating a learning environment, technology platforms, communication, Zoom and Google etiquette, sleep, monitoring screen time, taking care of yourself, and tips for engaging your student.
And just a reminder that these are just all recommendations, and we know that everyone's family situation is very different right now. So we do want to honor and respect that. So first, we're going to be going over routines and schedules. So in a traditional school day, the middle school and high school students have a lot of structure. They know when they're going to school, and then they know what time each of their classes are, when their lunch is, and then when they get off of school. So it can be really helpful for students and families to work together at home to recreate and implement these schedules to ensure that students are successful during their distance learning. And so one of a few of the reasons why we advocate for routines is that they can be really predictable and comforting. Students know what to expect, families know what to expect. And then in that same way, they can help you reduce your stress. So if your child knows that they have a live meet every day with their teacher at 8, if they get in the routine and in the habit of attending that live meet, then you don't always have to be reminding them. And then they can have less stress because they attend their live meet and then they're not falling behind in their classes. And then finally, routines can really help your child establish the mindset that they are going to school. And so, some of the tips we encourage is maybe having your child prepare their outfit the night before, or set an alarm, or even make a lunch the night before. And then, like, it's always good for your child to have a morning and a nighttime routine. So, in the morning, they get out of bed, they get dressed, they brush their teeth, and they prepare themselves for their live meetings with teachers, and this can help them feel a lot more confident. And so right now we know that the schedule that students had this week is going to change next week unless your student is opting for full-time distance learning. So students who are going to be returning to school next week will be in the AABB model for both middle school and high school. So Val, if you want to flip to the next slide, we can look at what the middle school schedule has looked like and how you can implement a routine within that. So this is the Faribault Middle School distance learning schedule for the week of January 11th. So you can see that it is fairly rigid. Students have 3 to 4 classes each day, and then they have time built in for themselves to do classwork. And so with the change to distance learning, students are going to have 3 days where they're distance learning at home and 2 days of structured school. So we really just want to encourage you to maybe talk with your student about, how they can give themselves a routine. And even if you just write it down, so that way they have a checklist of what they're going to do every day. So maybe after 7th hour connect at 2 o'clock, they decide that at 3 o'clock it's going to be screen free time where they go outside and they get some fresh air and they just take a break from screens. So in the next slide, it's the Faribault High School distance learning schedule, which is very similar to the Faribault Middle School schedule. Right, so you see like Wednesdays is time for open office and connections, and that's when students can connect with their teachers. That's going to be the same, but students will either be going to school on Monday, Tuesday, or they're going to be going to school on Thursday, Friday. And we really want to encourage you to encourage your child to take advantage of the open office times that teachers have, just because we know that in middle school and high school, students are learning more advanced curriculum and it can be challenging. So there are academic supports available, whether that be a teacher at the high school or an academic support specialist or doing homework help with community school at the middle school. All right, so we would love to hear from all of you families out there if you would like, and by all means, if you're multitasking right now and you don't have time, that is just fine. But what kinds of successes and challenges have you and or your child had in regards to schedules and routines during this time?
All right, so our next slide is going to be on creating a learning environment. So as you can see, we have two examples of what creating a learning environment would look like. One being a more successful, cleaner environment, and the other being more messy and more unstructured. Um, we're hoping that the environments that they're working in, given we know circumstances are different, but a clean, tidy space. As you can see in the picture, there's motivational things on the wall, probably there's schedules to the right and some baskets. And then in the other room, you'll notice there's things all over the floor, papers everywhere on the desk, and everything's kind of scattered all over the place. And the child is still in their pajamas in bed, probably taking a nap, who knows? So kind of as I mentioned before, having a clean and a good convenient workspace is good for the student. It's a little bit more motivational and helps them get going. So typically the location isn't the student's bedroom. Given the circumstances, again, we know things are different. Their learning space is wherever works best for them, but these are suggestions. Trying to eliminate distractions like TV, background noises, music, their phones ringing, things like that. Um, Ensuring the learning space has good environment so that the teacher can see them during their Google Meets and so they can see what they're doing. Making sure they have all the proper materials, the notebooks, school supplies that they need while they're working, as well as the chargers so their iPads or laptops don't die as they're working. Making sure that you're getting plans for them to take breaks, exercising, getting food or water, and just making sure that the space that they're working in is ideally for their learning. And then also letting your child add decorations and pictures is always a good recommendation as well, because that can keep them motivated.
So next we want to go over knowing the technology platforms. So technology is being used in classrooms way more than it ever has. And in the middle school and the high school, Seesaw and, or Schoology and Infinite Campus have been used, and so is Google Classroom. But right now it's just more than it's ever been. Um, so one of the things that we want you to know about these technological platforms is that it's okay if you don't know everything. Your student has spent time with their teacher reviewing these learning platforms and becoming knowledgeable about navigating the platforms. If you don't have a Infinite Campus account yet, that is something that's really important because you can use that to check your child's grades, their attendance, their assignments, and more. So if you haven't had one of those yet, we're going to open up a link below with the email address, but we just really encourage that all parents are using that to monitor their child's progress. And your child can also use their technology platforms to communicate with teachers. So a middle school or a high school student can just reach out to their teacher over Schoology or through their Gmail, and then meet with ask a teacher for help or ask a teacher for an extension. So, and I know that sometimes students can be really intimidated to reach out to teachers, and sometimes that takes a lot of confidence to build up. But just encouraging your child to do it once and then maybe helping them draft the email to their teacher can help them continuously gain confidence over time to take the initiative on their own and to reach out. If you are having any trouble with internet access, you can contact your child's school for a hotspot. And so this document, the technology support, is going to be a guide for you to know what exactly to do and who to contact if you're having any technology issues. So like if you have an iPad problem, you can do a troubleshooting guide, but if that doesn't work, then you can contact one of these people based on your child's building. If you need any help with the parent accounts, like I was mentioning, you can email tech support at Faribault or if you need a campus parent account, which is the Infinite Campus portal help at Faribault. And then Schoology, if your child is having any trouble with Schoology, you can email tech support. Yeah.
Is
And this
it
document,
big enough? Sorry.
yep, it's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of our questions for you all, and no worries if you don't feel like sharing, but how has your experience been with technology as the main learning platform for your child? Because since last spring, everything has changed so much in the way that we're doing school and that children are able to learn. So sometimes it's good to just reflect on that and to hear parent voices on what their experience has been.
Um, Here we're going to be talking about the Zoom and Google etiquette. So again, regardless of the learning platform, there are certain behaviors and expectations to follow when learning digitally. So as most of you know, there's synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And then Melody, you're going to have to do this definition because I always get it wrong. So if you could do that for me.
So synchronous is when students are learning, like it's just like a live Google Meet, they're learning in the moment. And Lindsay just asked if students are required to attend Google Meets. That's that synchronous learning. And the answer to that is yes, students are required to attend those. And that every single teacher has different expectations for what that connections time looks like. So for some teachers, it might actually be a Schoology message on certain days of the week. So just again, more communication with the student and with the teacher can actually help you know if that student is supposed to be in a Google Meet at that time. And
Is
then
this historically, excuse me, is this historically this way or is this new?
the synchronous and asynchronous learning.
The requirement, I mean, to go into Google Meets, is that new or has that been the way I thought? I was told it was optional.
Google Meets should be required, but every single teacher has different standards of what a connection time will look like. So maybe some students won't have a Google Meet. Instead, they'll be required to submit an assignment to show they're engaged, or they'll be required to email the teacher or communicate in some way.
And I believe with the middle, like if you looked back to the middle school schedule, they have more in-person or like more Google Meet sessions than I believe the high school does. The high school's a little bit more open in that case. So depending on whether your child's at the middle school or the high school, makes a difference as well. But I believe if that teacher did put out a Google Meet for the middle school, that is typically a required session. For the high school, I don't believe so. Okay. So then again, so part of that, which we kind of already went over, your child should know their schedule. Typically, if you don't see your child on a Google Meet, it's because they know that they don't have to be meeting with anybody. They're probably going to be more aware of their schedule than any of us. Typically, as mentioned, they sent out that schedule at the middle school and the high school, so then they have an easier something to look at to reference as to when those times will be. But with that, you want to just encourage them, have your child reflect on their participation and things that they've been learning in their live sessions. That's very helpful for them. And it also helps them remember what they're going over in school. And then keeping in mind all the features that Google has. So, muting themselves, the chat, virtual backgrounds, polls. There's also an option, I believe, in Google that you can turn off self-view, so they don't have to be the child or the student doesn't have to be looking at themselves as well if they're not comfortable in the area that they're in. And then we also have a SOAR virtual learning matrix, the picture on the side. So like, you know, making sure that they're having self-control, following instructions, using the raise your hand feature, utilizing the chat when they're working, you know, with the teacher, having them stay on task. So logging in on time, organizing their materials, making sure they're visible to the teacher, achievement, completing the tasks, you know, to stay on top of assignments, sharing and collaborating with others, writing and complete sentences. And then the last one, you know, just making sure they're being respectful, muting the microphone so that others don't hear the background noises, using kind words, helping each other during group assignments, and then resolving conflict peacefully. So with that, there was, I believe, a distance learning expectation form that was sent out by the school, the middle school and the high school. So I'll go ahead and go to that form. Let me make it a little bigger here. Give me 1 second. So this was sent out, I believe, at the beginning of the school year, just with what the expectations were for the middle school and high school families. On distance learning for families, what it looks like for students, and then what it looks like for the teachers. So just kind of like we went over, establishing routines, staying connected with your child's teachers, encouraging mental and physical health for your child, monitoring how much time your child is spending online, and then the expectations for students, um, setting up a work area, checking in for attendance on Infinite Campus, which is really important. I think that's the primary thing too to keep in mind, is just to make sure they're checking in their attendance time. Students can monitor their progress again on Infinite Campus as well. And then the expectation for teachers, which is good because then you can see that there was expectations given for them. So learning activities and assignments that will be posted in Schoology. The activities are both online. There's both online and offline components. And then lessons including presentations, videos, independent practices, and things like that as well. So
So
here
these are
was the
distance
winter
learning.
2020
Yeah.
distance learning expectation for the middle school.
And these are the same for the high school.
Okay.
With connections and open office.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
All right. And one thing we did want to mention that we haven't yet from that distance learning expectations is that each day your student should be checking in on Infinite Campus. And it's really just like a button and it says, I'm here. And that's their attendance log for the day to make sure that they did attend distance learning. So now we're going to be moving on to communication. So just because students are learning online right now doesn't mean that they're learning independently. Teachers are still playing a critical role in distance learning. So we really want to encourage you to think of your child's teacher as a partner for your child's learning. And partnerships require strong communication to be effective. And it's also really good to establish a communication plan with your child's teacher. So if you reach out to your child's teacher, you can talk about how is best for you two to communicate with each other. So there was some questions about like in the chat about, how can I get my student's schedule? Well, each teacher is going to have a different schedule for their student, for their class for the week for that student. So maybe you wanted to email the teacher and ask, like, could you send me a copy of the schedule for a week so I know that my student is joining live meets when they're supposed to? Or maybe you want to know the homework assignment. So it's just, we really want to recommend that you do reach out to the teacher and communicate, because that can be a really powerful asset in your child's learning and in your ability to support your child. But we really want to make sure that you know that you don't have to be the teacher to ensure that your child learns. So The teachers are subject matter experts in the information and knowledge that they're teaching, and you don't need to know all of this. If students are having trouble with homework help, they can reach out to their teacher. At the high school, there's academic specialists. At the middle school, there's homework help during community school, or there's a program called RISE at both the middle school and the high school that offers homework help. So as long as you just take that step to reach out, or you encourage your child to reach out, your child should be like given academic support if they need it. And then it's always good if you talk with your child about what they are learning and give your child that time to reflect. And just asking simple questions like, oh, what are you learning? What are you reading? What do you think about that? Are all just good questions to start dialogue between you and your student, and then to allow the student to have time to process all of the information that they're learning. And I think especially during this time when students are using screens more than ever, this can be a really effective way of letting the information that students are learning to really sink in, and then they know how to use that information and maybe in school next year. It's not something that they're just going to forget about. So then it's also like good to know that your child has a weekly schedule of classes. And again, you can reach out to the individual teacher. A parent asked if we could send out those schedules that we showed you, and we will send them to the emails that you registered with. And then just be involved in your child's education. So just in the ways that you can. So in communication, in discussing your child's learning with your child. And then you can also get familiar with the resources and support available at your school. Are there any questions or comments on communication? Nope. Okay, we can move on. Oh, and so this is the Faribault Middle School teacher calendar of availability. So you can see that at 12, staff take a lunch, but at 12:30, staff have open office on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's time that if your child is academically struggling, or if they want to connect with their teacher, that's time that a student can connect with their teacher. Those connections hours are when teachers are either facilitating live meets or doing some other type of activity with students. So that's when they're unavailable.
And then I don't know if you saw Lindsay's question, it would be helpful if teachers sent out weekly schedules every week and not to have contact every teacher separately each week.
Yeah, so that's definitely feedback that we can bring back to teachers. And I know that some families do use Schoology for parents. And if the teacher gives you an access code, I believe you are able to see all of the work that your child submits each day. And then you probably will be able to see the class schedule. But it might just be you need to reach out to the teacher just to say, are you using Schoology for parents, and can I have an access code? Any other questions on that?
And he says none here. Nope.
All right.
Awesome. All right, so then we're now going to be talking a little bit about sleep. So now remember, these are suggestions and we might not all get the proper amount of sleep that we're supposed to, but thinking COVID or pre-COVID versus the present, how has your child or your family sleep schedule changed since then? Something to kind of discuss a little bit. Brenda just typed, the kids want to sleep in every day and stay up late. Yep. I could probably say that's pretty common for a lot of kids that I know.
And he says, very true.
I know for myself, it was hard to get back into routine once we were on lockdown. So it's definitely hard to get back into everything once you've been working from home or staying home for so long. Lindsay says, my daughter sleeps all day sometimes. She has an alarm set, but falls back to sleep. I can attest to that as well. In the mornings, especially 5 alarms. And now keeping in mind, especially as kids, how important sleep is. It's just as important as food and water and their physical and emotional safety. How lack of sleep contributes to behavior problems, mood disturbances, instability, obesity. It definitely has a negative impact on their learning. Sleeping in a predictable pattern is important. So making sure you're creating an evening routine, a morning routine, and it helps avoid teenagers being, throwing tantrums or all the things that teenagers get to be. And then just making sure that TV and tech devices should be off for 1 hour before bedtime because the blue light stimulates our brains and just keeps us awake. To the right, you'll see a recommendation of sleep time. So keeping in mind your between school age and teenage years, 9 to 11 hours is recommended for them to sleep, or even 8 to 10. And then next to that, you'll see what's appropriate for them. So middle school age, 7 to 8 hours, at most 12 hours, teenagers, 7 hours, at most 11 hours. And then, of course, the not recommended hours of where they would fall for that as well. So just making sure they're at least trying to get what they can for sleep. It's just really important. And if they get sleep, they're more apt to be more engaged during the day because they don't feel as tired.
Northwest.
All right. So here's a discussion question. How do you feel about the increased use of screens among students for the purpose of school, entertainment, and social media?
Right, so now we're going to be going into monitoring screen time. So as we've discussed, like between distance learning going on right now, the use of screen time for entertainment and social media, students are spending more time than ever on devices. And the current research that we've read right now is that there isn't a magic number of how long your child uses screens, although I have heard 2 hours. Instead, you want to think about what your child is not doing when they are using screens. So are they not playing? Are they not talking with family members? Are they not doing chores? Are they not completing projects of interest to them? Are they not spending time outdoors? And as we just discussed, are they not sleeping? So that can kind of be a really good rule of thumb to measure if screen time is just going overboard right now. And then another rule of thumb is to consider the number of tasks being done versus the number of minutes being spent. So if a student is spending 3 hours between live Google Meets every day and then completing homework assignments, but another student is spending 3 hours scrolling through TikTok every day, The student who's spending that time to do his homework is being much more productive than the student who's just scrolling through TikTok. So those are the kinds of guidelines that we can recommend that you use. And we also want to acknowledge that technology and screen time isn't inherently bad. And as someone put in the chat, like, this is a really challenging time. And, technology and screen time can actually be really beneficial for teens because they want to spend time with their friends. And they are able to do this over FaceTime, or they can play virtual games together. So it does offer students the ability to connect in a time where like most of us are very, very socially isolated. And especially if that student didn't have siblings at home, that could even further isolate them. We want to encourage your child to include screen-free time in their daily routine, because it is pretty challenging to be staring at a screen all day. I know that I end up getting very overwhelmed and my eyes start hurting. And I'm sure pretty much everybody probably experiences that. So just to, if they do end up writing a routine or a daily schedule, to schedule time to go outside or to complete a project that they're interested in, and just to get their minds thinking in a different way, because your mind engages with a screen in a very different way than it's going to engage with a task. With a screen, a student can just mindlessly scroll, versus the task is actually engaging their mind way more. And then for complex tasks and text, the brain actually prefers paper. So I've had a lot of students that have struggled to do math on iPads, so they actually request paper and pencil, and that is an option. Or if your child wants to do the work on a piece of paper and then upload the answer to Schoology, that's also an option. And then if you can get your child reading anything, newspapers, sports magazines, books, those are all like really good ways to engage your brain in a different way. Let's see, and Lindsay commented that students get distracted with YouTube at times, but it's also used for school, so they can't block it. And we've heard that from many parents, that it can be really challenging for a student to have an iPad to do learning, because then there's the whole web that they could go on to. And then let's see, Brenda is saying that she's had the same problem, and then that she's put limits on apps like YouTube and even Safari. So if your child has an iPhone, I know that you can set up a parent control feature where you can set up a time limit. So let's say you only want your student to use YouTube for 30 minutes a day. You can set that time on there.
All right. So making sure that as parents, you guys are taking care of yourself. So, keeping in mind, COVID has created many additional stressors. So make sure that you guys are taking care of yourselves. So as we mentioned, routines are always good. That's a good way to keep us, best way to say it is to keep us, straight. That's always good for our body. Taking breaks, sleeping, socializing, keeping up on our nutrition, exercise, communicating with, someone outside your home. I know at the beginning of lockdown, we all had to see the same faces for a lot of days, and that was tough, not being able to communicate with your peers outside of your home. Making sure you develop a work-life balance plan. So being that we're working from home and the kids are home, or even if you're working outside and your kids are home, it's hard to separate home life, work life, so doing the best to separate those, making sure your workspace is your dedicated workspace so that it doesn't get around your house and you're reminded all day of your work. Routines, taking breaks is just really important, and then trying to end your day with a routine. And keep in mind, a lot of these are suggestions, so you might have your own way of what de-stresses you or the things that you do that as a stress relief. So try to make sure that you guys are doing those too, because as a parent, it's tough. COVID's been tough on parents.
All right, and now we're going to go over some of the ways that you can empower your child to be a learner. We just really love this graphic down here that says empowered learners are engaged learners. Right now, we're hearing so much about disengaged learners. So, like, one of the steps to moving away from being disengaged is to empower students to take agency. So, empowered and motivated students learn really well. And here are some tips that you can empower your child. So, we'll just read a few of these, just some of the highlights, but see the power of others partnering in your child's education by collaborating with them. So, as we talked about with communication, this can be your child's teacher, this can be admin, this can be social workers, really any school staff. Um, Listen, build trust, and know how to gradually release responsibility. So, especially in a time where students are alone learning on a screen, we don't always know, are they on YouTube or are they actually in their live Google Meet? And they're telling me that they don't have a live Google Meet, but I'm not really sure if that's right or not. Um, so it's just really important to establish a good trusting relationship with your student, and then to gradually release that responsibility and know that they're taking agency and initiative to be doing what they should be doing. And then, especially during this time when students aren't learning with their teachers in person, I think, especially for topics like science and math and English for ESL students, like it can be so challenging to be doing well during this time. So praise the efforts that your students are putting into learning. Even if they spend an hour on a math assignment and they get an A plus, like, praise that they spent that hour on the math assignment, because we don't want to limit students in thinking that it's their intelligence that's going to get them anywhere. We want them to know that if they put hard work in, the sky is the limit for them. And then just to really encourage positive self-talk. Right now is a time when many young people are experiencing a lot of mental health issues, and they can get down on themselves for many, many different reasons right now. So just if you hear your child say something negative about themselves, just really encourage them to think more positively. And maybe that's in the way of the student says, oh, I'm never going to understand this math assignment. Like, I just am not smart enough. Then, say the opposite, like, nope, you are very intelligent, and I know that you're capable of working through this and understanding it. And any additional comments or questions?